So, I'm Clive.
I'm Miles.
And we're not Extinction Rebellion. Not us two. You know, we're just part of a massive organism. But somehow today we're going to try and explain our part of that story. And it starts some time ago. But before we do that, and I think it relates to what we just heard, I want you to all think about the fact that it only takes 15 people to change the world. And actually, in the case of the person we've just been hearing from, it takes one person to make a difference. And one of you could be the next person that makes the difference. You're no different to us. We're nothing special, really nothing special. Totally not special. So it begins some time back in May 2018 in my old office in Borough, where we met the now very well-known Roger Allen, and he delivered us a talk. And it was not like the talk you perhaps hear now, but it was pretty devastating. And the floor fell out from underneath us. But luckily, we've worked together for a long time, so we were able to catch one another as we fell. And you know, it was me, Claire, Miles, and Charlie at the beginning. We have different practices. I'm a graphic designer. Miles, what would you call yourself?
I don't know. I was a fine artist, but I don't think of myself as a fine artist.
You're a fine artist. But yeah, and so, you know, prior to that, we've been working with Roger on something else called Stop Killing Londoners. And during that time, Roger had asked me to be his head of propaganda, which is the most onerous role you could ever be offered by Roger. But one thing we did say to him at that point was, you know, if we're going to do this again, we need more time. And so he gave us more time, and we had sort of 6 months to think about this stuff, and we were able to keep it around. But we worked very fast, didn't we? And it's sort of, and the shock of that uncertainty, that existential threat that was communicated to us in that meeting, that was the moment I instantly drew shock face. You started creating tons of skulls.
Yeah, I made a big, scary skull, and really, I mean, I think I knew we were fucked anyway. I've been hanging out with Claire a lot, and she had a lot of experience of death in her youth. So both her parents died young, and she sort of talked to me about climate change. Well, I knew about climate change, but I didn't really realise how close it might be, you know, things getting really, really bad. So at some point in the summer, I did a big skull, and I was really kind of like, oh! And I spent all day, the day before, drawing animal skulls, and I was really thinking I wanted it to be really strong and unpleasant. Later I did a sort of sadder, more coming to terms with its skull, but the first one was just ah!
And it's sort of, and that horror, and more importantly, the uncertainty of the existential threat, that void of uncertainty opening up beneath us, is something that I'd like to go into a bit more detail on. Because uncertainty is a sort of a pet thing of mine. And, you know, I have this thing called the uncertainty principle. And it's not the principle of quantum physics, quite obviously, because I'm not the sort of person who knows anything about quantum physics. It's not the Heisenberg one. It's the polar opposite of certainty. That certainty is so loved by capitalism because it provides predictability, which in turn provides profit. The certainty that makes our world ever more ubiquitous, ever more boring, ever nearer its end because of the extractive practices certainty demands. Think on a certain algorithmic world, where our data is harvested for profit, sold to greedy advertisers, who in turn use it to tell us what to buy, where to go, what's cool, what's not, often via the platforms they harvested the data from in the first place. Do you think that extractive world likes uncertainty? Certainly not. And do you think that what they're doing is in any way different from the extractive practices of the past? Certainly not. And do you think they'll stop it if we ask them? Definitely not. But all the great design and art movements in the past have emerged from periods of uncertainty. The arts and crafts movement, William Morris, a firebrand, a socialist. We know him now for his wallpaper. That's devastating. He must be turning in his grave. He was smashing the system. And that was design. It was coming from design. Arts and craft practice. He was saying, we don't need to go to a factory. We need to be working together at home, crafting things. He even went back to the medieval period for his influences.
But more importantly, he hated public speaking, and he became convinced that socialism was the only way to free mankind. So he ended up public speaking up to 3 times a day, against what he enjoyed doing.
Amazing. And it's sort of, the Bauhaus school. Hopefully you've all heard of the Bauhaus. That's a reaction to the First World War, the horrors of the First World War. It's how can we make something better? How can we make something better? We can invent an art school system that our own foundation system is still based on. It's craft biased. I'm just going to read a little bit of the end of their manifesto. And it is just the end. So let us therefore create a new guild of craftsmen, free of the divisive class pretensions that endeavoured to raise a prideful barrier between craftsmen and artists. Let us strive for, conceive and create the new building of the future that will unite every discipline, architecture and sculpture and painting, and which will one day rise heavenwards from the million hands of craftsmen as a clear symbol of a new belief to come. It's pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? 1919, that was done. Now we could go on and on about these sort of guys, but we wanted to sort of introduce some moments in history because we think it's a relatively important one. And it's one that graphic design sort of has a little part of in this logo in the top corner. Milton Glaser. If you don't know him, look up his work. He did it for free for the New York Tourist Board. He did that for free, and he did it for a bankrupt New York. So New York at that time was totally bankrupt, and it was described as a place so scary that you shouldn't take the subway. And it's but it wasn't that, because look what was happening there. That uncertain place was creating an explosive art scene. Everything here. You've got the start of rap, you've got street art emerging, you've got Madonna. You've got Africa Bambaataa, the Ramones, the Stonewall Riots, Keith Haring drawing line art on the subway. He used to spend his nights going out and just drawing, free drawings all over the place. An explosion out of uncertainty. Do you want to say anything about New York? No?
I think you should go faster so we can talk about the future.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. That's you, Miles.
What have I to say about that?
I don't know.
The past is more important. I want to talk about the future, really. I guess me and Claire, and then you lot had looked at a lot of past stuff. Suffragettes, kind of classic. They're always an inspiration. They did everything extremely thoroughly, and in their design, in all different ways they attempted to sort of influence society through jewellery for posh ladies, down to, and they did direct action, which was way more spiky than XR. They went down Regent Street with hammers and smashed every window. That would get people going, wouldn't it?
But also that we constantly sold this lie of that a technological future will actually save us. That we're on this curve towards modernism. Modernism's going to win. It's crap. The past is more important when the future's at stake, because actually all the problems we're experiencing now have in some way been experienced through different means in the past. We as human beings are no different now than we were 2,000 years ago. We haven't evolved at all. All the problems But then quite literally, from a visual point of view, we looked back and sort of cherry-picked what sort of stuff could influence us. And you'll see there's a bit of Miles in the corner there. And the stuff projects in the background, brilliantly well branded from a brand. I hate the word branding, by the way. It's obviously connotations of ownership and also the literal branding. Slaves are branded. Come on, let's try and. I will use it again, but I don't like using it. Paolotti. Oh my God, he invented pop art. That's where the colours were taken from for Extinction Rebellion. And the Bauhaus. Roy Eckersley, wonderful graphic artist.
Yeah, this is from Atelier Populaire in Paris '68. That was like a cooperative. People came together, worked on designs together, and they voted on which one to screen print, and then they fly posted them that night. And we started working with some people called Paris Redux 68. Paris 68 Redux, and they are redoing the posters, but kind of updating them. Well, they were till they met us, and now they're like mashing in XR stuff with Paris 68 stuff, with stuff they like, and I'm stealing from them and they're stealing from me, and we're all happy.
Graphic design is all about stealing.
We steal words from each other, that's really important.
So, in all of this, when you hear really bad news, it is massively debilitating, and people have talked about it earlier today, that sort of how it stops you dead in your tracks, and you feel a sort of overwhelming sense of grief. But actually, the reaction we had was action. We went into sort of ridiculous overdrive on. I hadn't designed as much stuff in as I did in that period. It was just mental. It was. I probably went a bit crazy, but it was sort of. But from simple things, we took things like wood type. So that starts as, we started thinking about processes. Because processes are massively important, especially if you're building a movement. How do you get people to join? Well, you give them a means to join. It's not just about getting arrested. So go on, a bit about wood type.
Yeah, I was starting to use it. Yeah, so I was doing this body politic project, and that's kind of an extension of it, turning your body into a place of political expression. And I'd started to buy wood blocks. What are they called? This stuff?
Wood type.
Letterpress. And I started making images, and that sort of became a thing, which has like spread. And surprisingly, it creates like what we didn't think would create like a space for people to talk. So one of our gang, Bridget, she teaches people to do it, but she makes them do it really slowly, so she can like talk to them about, about how fucked we are. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We got forced to do a lot of work very fast, and changing things continually, and throwing stuff back and forward continually, which is kind of important. I spent years being a fine artist on my own, making just utter shite, and like doing awful advertising jobs. But I just was in the right place at the right time at the end.
So what do you do? It's like everything we were doing at this stage had to be made very accessible for anyone else to use. Because the idea behind this was for us to not do it anymore and would quickly release it. Giving away, doing work for free. Really, really important. Fucks caps. I don't know whether any of you do type design here, but I did that in 3 weeks. So it's sort of, that's the speed I was working at the time.
I thought you started off me in 10 minutes.
And the first version of it had such appalling word spacing that we had to re-release it again to everyone. But those were the pressures we felt were under, because we wanted people to be able to use this really, really quickly, because the message had to get out there really quickly. And we were very keen to get to a point of releasing it.
But hang on, back one. But and Fuck's Cap's got dissonance designed into it, and like fracture. So normally, it's all new to me, but normally in typography letters are slightly different sizes, but in Fuck's Caps that's like exaggerated. So So you can see the, you know.
It's accentuated.
Yeah. And it was like, in version 1, that was like eye-jarringly.
Yeah.
But it was just like, that's just part of the thing of taking risks, isn't it?
Yeah, making mistakes, being happy to make mistakes, not worrying about mistakes, and actually, you know, being happy that mistakes are a part of the human process. I mean, imperfection is a really important part of what we do. We're constantly told that everything has to be perfect, and that's absolutely a load of nonsense. And that the idea of this being a font that is actually printed when it looks like it's a wood type that's been printed. So a lot of the digital typefaces for any font, and I won't go on about type because I can go on about type for a long time. Most of the digital typefaces are actually sharp because they copied directly the original letterpress typefaces. Of course, letterpress typefaces embed themselves into paper, so they soften when they're printed. So it's sort of.
And in terms of like perfection, it's something that Claire Farrell says quite a lot at the moment. So not only in like what we do, but also in like our sort of position or our political position or our philosophical standpoint, or even like the tactics we use. We don't have to be like perfect. We don't have to be in a position where we can like, you know, defend ourselves in arguments endlessly. I mean, things are so fucked. We just have to be generally in the right direction, and we do, you know. And the whole idea that like the whole world is full of people who actually know what's going on is just total bollocks. And politicians don't know what's going on. People who make money don't know what's going on. That's all a myth.
Everyone's quite scared. You'd be surprised about the people that want to talk to Extinction Rebellion. So a little bit about skulls.
Like what? That was just skull 1. I just did it really fast and I was thinking about death, and we're all fucked, and I've got a daughter who's 13, and future looks really bad.
But next. I mean, it's also, why are we so scared about death? Why are we so scared of death? Why doesn't our culture talk about death? What are the issues surrounding death? Lots of people had problems with using skulls, and yet actually that's a distillation. You know, that's genderless, that skull. It's, you know, I mean, that's the amazing thing. It's sort of, and we seem to, especially in Northern Europe, we have this weird relationship with death. You know, let's face it, everyone in this audience is going to die. You know, that's just a fact. What you do with that time between, you know, when you're born and when you die, that's the important bit. And don't let it get taken away from you by tossers.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, for some reason I do woodcuts, and it gives you like a really, it's really obvious, but it gives you a really sharp, stark image, and you have to sort of, you have to make a decision with a big knife and like follow it through. You know, so it gives you like a sense of clarity. And I just give black and white things to Clive, and he does like magic, and other people do magic.
That's part of what the magic is. The magic is the mix. I mean, and the magic is the fact that someone can do this, or someone can do that. And both of those things are equally relevant.
Except mine's better than yours.
Well, are we going to do the straw poll? Are we going to take it to the straw poll?
We'll do that in the pub.
But also, you know, this is also talking to the fact that we're an inclusive movement. That actually, by allowing ourselves to look differently, but also having unity, that actually says something slightly different. That's not what you'd get out of a normal sort of corporate guidelines document. I mean, that would say, oh, the logo needs to be down there, it needs to be this big. But we're not going to say any of that stuff, because that's just total rubbish. It's so boring. You know, that creates ubiquity. Ubiquity is not what humanity is about. We're not corporate people. We're human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I only say mine is better than yours to Clive. And like, even like in the language we use, I work with a little gang. Even in the language we use, we start to try and erase like the possessive, you know, words. That's because, you know, we're reading Ursula K. Le Guin's Dispossessed is pretty good. Take it to a higher level. And yeah, so I mean, everything I do, and I encourage, and everybody else does generally, is like, we have like WhatsApp groups where we like, I'm always like bombarding other people with like, What about this? What about this? Got any ideas for this? How can we make this better? So it's not like mine is better than yours.
No, and more importantly, it was about getting this design program out there, which is now out there now, and people can use it, all of the local groups. So if you're not in a local group, I hope you're all in Exile Falmouth, I'm sure you are, I won't ask for a raise of hands. Join one, and you can use this design program, you can add to the design program as well. There's only three, well, I like to say there's no rules, but there are 3 rules. You use the logo, you use the font, and you use the colours. So if you're an illustrator and you want to do stuff for Extinction Rebellion, you don't have to change your style of illustration. You just illustrate for Extinction Rebellion. It really is that simple. And you know, and we've seen different interpretations of this appear around the globe now. So, I mean, the Dutch, we went over to Amsterdam recently, and the Dutch have done an amazing job, haven't they, of reinterpreting it into their own sort of folk style.
Yeah, so the Dutch, their first action, they used English language art images possibly, and they got like slagged off for being foreign art students causing trouble. So they got together and they're the only people who strategically looked at redesigning stuff, which is a bit of a shame. Yeah, a whole gang of them got together, thought about it really hard, and they did a whole new illustration style, which is very sort of playful, and it referenced kind of Dutch Miffy illustration, that sort of thing. And they rewrote all our stuff into Dutch, and well, they didn't rewrite it, they reinterpreted it, and they put a lot of humour into it, which we haven't done yet.
Which neatly segues into messaging. But also what Extinction Rebellion is it's sort of what I describe it as is an umbrella movement, which in sort of my speak means it can hold many different ideas underneath it. So it doesn't matter if you're a vegan, it doesn't matter even if you're a Tory, you can come and join Extinction Rebellion and your voice is as valid as the next person's. It's not a political movement, it's not a left movement. This is a movement for everyone. This is a crisis. We want everyone to be involved. And it means that we need to be inclusive, and the messaging needed to sort of be overarching to ensure that space could be filled with other people's messaging. So we started to play with language a bit with Rebel for Life. So rebel has always been considered quite a negative word. And so the idea of taking a negative word and turning it into a positive word is something quite important. And I think, you know, the more you play with language, and I think Charlotte was talking about it earlier, trying to stick needles into what language is and prize it apart and try and alter people's minds by using language quite deliberately and carefully is something we will continue and try to do. I mean, one of my favourite things at the moment is talking about abject wealth. And it's sort of, everyone talks about abject poverty, but we have abject wealth. You know, that's a definite thing, abject wealth. Well, Extinction Rebellion is, you know, we're not a DIY movement, we're not a punk movement, we're a do-it-together movement. The point of all the processes that we created, from the print workshops to releasing the design program, to local groups, the creation of local groups. The point of that is that we get people involved and we do it together, and we do it together at all of these different levels. There isn't a sort of main leadership, that actually we're a leader-full movement, effectively. So we're full of lots of different leaders in different places.
And all the sort of designs that we work on, you know, each time you revisit them, new people have a chance to like put input, and like things get better like that. And even like you get a new person coming into the group who's a maker, who's got different skills, and then like everything just like upgrade a notch, you know.
Miles's house. It's just some of the processes. I mean, you know, this is the joy of taking something from wood type, or something that's actually a practical, direct approach, but you can actually make it out of, you know, 3D printing and stuff like that. Hand painting.
That's my bath.
He's actually in it, the other side. But and we now have an arts factory in a secret location. But all of this stuff is being handmade, and it's really important that it's handmade because then you see the imperfections. The imperfections are there. There's odd brush strokes here, odd printing things there, and as perfect as you try and make it, it's never perfect.
Yeah, so this is probably like March, I think. So because so much stuff got destroyed for October, I put in a lot of time making giant wood blocks. So I've got like Frugality this long, and it's just made out of, the first ones I made out of chipboard found in the street, jigsawed, glued together, pretty quick, and then printed, like with 2 or 3 of us jumping on top afterwards. Does that make sense? I haven't got any of these things. And it gives you a beautiful printed texture, and it just meant that in October we could produce a huge amount of stuff, and we can still keep producing stuff now because we have to keep going.
And then those sort of print techniques, I mean, for all the flippancy, Miles spent a lot of time sort of researching the inks, everything really, and how to enable people to do this live on the street. Again, it's part of that pulling people in. You give people an opportunity to do a street workshop where they can print directly. They start talking together. They meet one another. It's those conversations that begin. Friendships start forming. I mean, it's so important.
Yeah, and so doing body politic, Claire was like, the only radical thing you can do in fashion is to not sell anything. And so we sort of started off, trying to do things without money. Donation jar, optional donation jar, visible, I'm afraid. But that has meant that we've managed to keep the art group moving without, because funds are inconsistent with XR. But what was I talking about? Money. So that was important before Extinction Rebellion. And then the designer of the symbol is a massive anti-capitalist, and he will not budge an inch. And so it's been really good because it's just really good to be forced to be fucking really pure and hardcore about things. So nothing with the symbol on you can take a donation for, or can be used commercially in any way whatsoever.
So everything was sort of made together from scratch, apart from the symbol, which was created in 2011 by the anonymous ESP, Extinction Symbol Person, who remains a part of the movement. Is a wonderful person, great influence, and but everything else had to be made from scratch because we didn't want to borrow anything from the existing culture because we wanted to explode onto the scene. We didn't want to whimper onto the scene, and having that symbol floating on a flag, which is why we asked him, because I remember Claire saying to me, "Can you design something like this?" I was like, "Well, we could just ask him to use that." It's sort of, you see that on a flag and you see a sea of flags, a sea of colour, and it's an immensely emotional moment for me personally, that when you see that sort of discord and unity in one space is quite amazing. But again, it's almost like this is a time thing, isn't it, really? I don't know. These are all different leaflets from different periods. I did some of those and not others. And it's sort of, but the point was not that, but this, where I didn't do any of this, nor did Miles really. You did the woodcuts, obviously, but all of this was done by other designers, and they formed part of a campaign that still runs now called Paint the Streets.
And Paint the Streets is going to be coming again soon. So if you send in something very good, it'll get used.
Well, and actually the point of Paint the Streets is sort of that actually, we send out lots of posters, but then actually the local groups can add in their own messages. That's why most of these posters are message-less, because they're evergreen designs. So that then all the local groups can add in messages about local issues, effectively, and paste them up around somewhere like maybe Falmouth, You know, you could paste them up around here maybe. I mean, that'd be quite a good thing to do. But while you're pasting them up, you also get to meet more people and new people. There's nothing better than going out pasting. And you know, admittedly I live in Hackney, so if you got arrested for pasting up posters in Hackney, you'd be really unlucky. You know, really, really unlucky. In fact, you know, you'd probably get a policeman helping you if you were struggling. So it's sort of, but I don't know what the deal is around Falmouth. But what it enables you to do is go out as a group. You go for, maybe you have a pint first, a bit of Dutch courage, and you're talking with people you've never met before. It's a great activity. It's really good fun. So the other really key points of what the art group provides, we're the kind of the glue that sticks the movement together. So when we're holding a space, that space feels like it's our space. And it's important because, you know, what's going to happen in that space is different to what happens in most spaces, because we have a thing called regenerative culture. We want people to experience, but they need to sort of feel it viscerally in the way we express it as well. So here we have the wonderful Red Brigade. I don't know, Mars, do you want to talk a bit
about
Red Brigade? Or?
I mean, they're just really good, aren't they? I mean, I don't know much about them. They just appeared, and they're very good at de-escalating. You know, they make great photographs. We care quite a lot about the photographs that are created, and as well as dressing the spaces, we try and dress the actions. So initially, when you had people locked on, we'd have like posters put around them, or like patches on people when they're speaking. And we try and pay, because the photographs hopefully go around the globe, and so art direction and set dressing is very important.
So also we're obviously we're in the middle of a culture clash, I suppose is the best term, and in that, we're often portrayed as being possibly terrorists, Extinction Rebellion, which is obviously a lot of nonsense. But how do you counter a claim of being a terrorist? Well, one thing you can do is get your stuff collected by the V&A, because then it makes it much more difficult for them to claim that you're a terrorist, because you can say, well, wait a second, my work's in the V&A, I'm not a terrorist. and also, you get Penguin to release a book, because that helps as well. But you also tell them to release it on recycled paper and change their production techniques entirely. But also you get to do wonderful things like save blue boats. So that was going to be taken by the police, and I got a call to come down because I knew I'd been in talks with the National Maritime Museum to get the pink boats brought back from the police. And so I quickly contacted Laura and said, can you come down to Waterloo and can you perhaps have a blue boat instead of a pink one? And they came down, they checked it for asbestos, because apparently that period of boat sometimes has asbestos in it. And they took it. And then they put interpretation around it, because actually that boat is not as important as its name, because that boat is named Polly Higgins. And she came up earlier, and had she succeeded in what she wanted to do, which was to make ecocide law, we wouldn't have had to have existed. I could have just been, just doing, I don't know, my normal graphic design work. It's sort of, because that would have stopped people from chopping bits of the Amazon down willy-nilly. That sort of international law would have made a massive difference. And it was so sad that she died. And, but hopefully, by putting that in front of the National Maritime Museum, more people know about Polly Higgins, because she should be very much more famous than she is now. Sorry. Pink boats. Everyone seen this before? Pink boats? Why put a pink boat in Oxford Circus? Well, why not is the answer, I suppose. But it's a massive statement. What's going to happen when we have a massive amount of flooding? Isn't it wonderful to see a boat floating on a sea of people? But also that boat is a stage for people to make music of. But then more importantly, around the world, it begins to be copied. So that's Times Square in New York. You know, we've got a brightly sort of very weird lime green belt. But you know, that gets seen through the media. It gets copied elsewhere. The movement is growing. You know, wow. You know, this is making us very happy, basically. But then in places like Pakistan, where you know doing protest is going to be a lot more difficult than here, they've taken something that they first did in Germany. So as the ice melts, it's obviously they're not actually going to hang themselves, but it's symbolic. But again, here you see the design program in operation. They are in a completely different place. They're doing a completely different thing, but it's still very obviously Extinction Rebellion. And then equally in Chile, dying, which is something we've done here. And then all over the world, it's sort of starting to happen. So we can now actually say, something like one global community, it actually means something. Because at the beginning it wasn't one global community, it was a few people in London and a few more in Stroud. But now we can say one global community, and it means that we are a movement that is decentralised and we're acting together full of leaderful people. And who knows where the next part and the most important part of Extinction Rebellion is, because I've always doubted that this country would be the place that made the massive difference, where the difference needs to be made is on the front lines, not here, and that's starting to happen.
I'm sure I remember Roger saying once that we'd just fuck it up and the Germans would get it right. But the future's much more interesting because this is the past, isn't it? One more slide, Clive.
Yeah, I know. But also, 70 countries. So this is change. This is how you start change, and you do it by making lots of mistakes. You do it by making it up as you go along, and you also do it by looking back at the past and learning lessons. I think we stand on the shoulders of other people that have come before us, but this time it's got to work. Thank you.
And the future. For me, the next bit is much more interesting because we have to grow exponentially in size, but also in reach and in depth and in the parts of society we reach. And we don't know how we're going to do that. So we need everybody, and we need everybody on the streets, obviously. And it's not like Extinction Rebellion can go on for years. So we either do it quite swiftly, or then we don't, and you're all fucked. I think that's about it.